look at a screen. Now, Cornelius asked me to do an impulse presentation, which is his code word for don't rabble on. I'm kind of like that annoying toy. You put a battery in, it starts talking about hydrogen. It doesn't stop until the battery is empty. So he asked me to do an impulse presentation. And in the vein of today, it's a decade of acceleration. I would like to touch upon a number of things. First, we're going to look at what tipping points are. Then secondly, exponential growth. How does that work? And how do we perceive that as human beings? And then lastly, time scales. I mean, what is midterm, long-term, short-term, etc., and why is that important? Now, just to recap, yesterday we had very exciting meetings. We heard a lot about partners, new partners, existing partners, but we also had the pleasure of having our advisory board meeting, which is a group of very wise people that gave us feedback. And one of the things they told us is not just all about hydrogen, because we like to talk about hydrogen a lot. They said there's other things, there is battery storage, there is countries, so maybe the priorities are slightly different in the short term. People don't have any energy, so give them first something that they can use, etc. There are topics of finance, etc. So not just hydrogen. So today, I'll keep it very short about hydrogen. It's not just about hydrogen. The other thing that I would like to give is, we did speak about hydrogen, of course, at the MENA Hydrogen Alliance, and that is a growing group of people. Of course, we know that the interest in hydrogen also in the Middle East and North Africa is growing, as well as in Europe. So they also said it's not just all about Europe. We talk a lot about Europe. Then somebody looked around the room and said, why are there so many Dutch people at this table? So yes, we take that on board. We do make an effort diversifying the topics and the people and all of that. And hopefully next time we'll probably have also more women in this room, because that's another topic that we need to work on. Now, let's look at tipping points and what they are in the framework of the energy transition. Now, there is some experience with tipping points. And if you look at disruptions in markets, then typically when something reaches 3% market share, then you see actually that, there is an acceleration typically by a diversion of capital inflows from the incumbent to something new. And if you then look at, where that has happened, gas lighting, for example, switch to electric lighting, but also landline phones, mobile phones, all of those things had tipping points somewhere between 2 and 5%. So a rough estimation, when something has 3% market share, most of the money going forward goes to the new thing. And that then leads to accelerated growth, exponential growth. Now, if we then look at our topics, non-hydro renewable electricity, that has already passed the station long time ago in 2008, that had a market share of 3% of all electricity. And we see now that most of the new money has been going to renewables for a number of years now. Cars, 2.2% of all new cars are currently electric vehicles and plug-in hybrid electric vehicles. So there we're probably at the tipping point. And we see that in certain countries already. Tesla has the biggest market share in a couple of months. So that is happening. Green hydrogen still a little bit further away. I mean, the predictions are that by 2025, we'll have 3 to 5% compared to gray hydrogen. So that is still a disclaimer compared to everything else that hydrogen can replace, probably slightly further out. But then what does that mean? Because this is, I guess, I'm preaching to the choir, all of this. We've seen a decline in cost of these technologies, solar and wind, and because of that, you open up more markets. Because the market grows, the cost further declines. So you get into the cycle of ever falling cost, following a learning curve, as well as an exponential growth of the market. Now, there is a problem with exponential growth. And let us think about what that means. If we I gave you a large piece of paper and I asked you to fold it, and then you fold it again, and then I asked you to do that 50 times. And I'm sure there is engineers that can tell you that you cannot fold paper that many times. After 7 times, it's impossible. We cut it and we keep doing it. So for the sake of argument, we fold paper 50 times. Now, how tall would the stack be? Does anybody have an idea? Is it like, you know, the roof? Is it the building? Is it Burj Khalifa? What is it? Anybody an idea? How tall is the stack? The moon. You're actually thinking in the right order of magnitude. You're about 120 million kilometers, which is somewhere between Mercury and the sun. So the sun is 150 million kilometers. So you're actually pretty far out into space and way beyond the moon. And that is only 50 times. So you're doubling something 50 times, you're almost at the sun. And this is a problem because the human brain is not hardwired to understand this kind of growth. We somehow think in linear terms. And if something doubles every year, every 2 years, we just underestimate it. And we've seen that in the past, and we keep seeing that right now. If you look at all the predictions that we did, and I think Paul showed yesterday what we thought, or it was Cornelius, what we thought stuff would be 10 years ago, completely underestimated it. And that was our how do you call it, optimistic scenario. So nobody has been able in the past to predict the growth of renewables because we just don't get exponential growth. Now, is that bad? To some extent, because then we're not ready. Now, the work that we've been doing is because we understand that this exponential growth concept is difficult for us. And the other issue that we have is if we work from using bottom-up scenarios, you know, you're basically thinking from the status quo. You're not thinking in terms of exponential growth. You're not thinking in terms of tipping points where you have a real disruption in the market. You're thinking, okay, we have 80 million new cars every year. What do I expect people will buy in terms of electric vehicles or plug-in hybrid vehicles or hydrogen vehicles? A few percent here and there, and then you build it up, and you always underestimate what's happening if you have disruption, if you have exponential growth. So that's why we thought when we started working on the North Africa Europe Hydrogen Manifesto, we have to think from, you know, where are we going to go? Not do the bottom up, because we will underestimate what's going to happen, but what do we think is going to be the situation in the future? And that was the 2050 vision for Europe. We worked on it. We said we can have a 50% electricity system and 50% based on green hydrogen. Then where does that need to come from? We will import a large portion of that. So that was the basic idea behind the North Africa Europe Hydrogen Manifesto. We communicated with the European Commission. They read it. They actually adopted some of it. But then we also decided that, okay, 2050 far out vision, long term, let's think about what we have to do right now. And we have to give Ad van Wijk a lot of credit for the 2 × 40 gigawatt initiative, which we supported as an organization, as DII, but it's actually part of the European hydrogen strategy right now. And to give you also some insight, recently the Chief of Staff of Frans Timmermans, Executive Vice President of the European Commission, recently said, well, you know, we had 10 million tons of hydrogen by 2030, 40 gigawatts plus 40 abroad to make that work, and then 1 million tons in 2024 and 4 gigawatts. So yeah, 1 million ton, 4 gigawatts, 10 million ton, 40 gigawatts. And then Ad told him, listen, 4 gigawatts doesn't give you a million ton of hydrogen. So then he said, well, we actually listened and we did the math, and within 5 minutes, we actually increased the target to 6 gigawatts. So whoever is in the business of selling electrolyzers in Europe, you have to probably buy other coffee, because he's helped your business, I think, tremendously. Now this is COP26. We see that we have already increased the global temperature to 1.2 degrees, which is already causing quite some disturbance in weather patterns, droughts, and all of the things that we know. But it's also important to realize that this is a cumulative thing. This is not something that even if we stop emitting carbon right now, this doesn't go away. This is here to stay. So the current disruption that we have is going to be with us. So what we're talking about is going forward, how much more are we going to pollute the atmosphere. And you know, if we add up all the pledges, there's calculations ongoing about what's happening in COP26. Probably if all of these are going to be met, you know, we might just, you know, scrape the 1.5, probably a little bit beyond. But that means that we all have to also not just have pledges, but also act on them. And then if you look at some of the discussions about, okay, there's a lot of discussion, but these longer term net zero targets and the shorter term ones. And I would like to give you an example of India, who said we're going to be net zero carbon by 2070. Most countries and regions have that same pledge by 2050. India says, well, we didn't cause much of the current 1.2 because all that cumulative carbon was not ours. So fair point, it's politics. I get it why they come up with that argument. But in addition, they increased the shorter term target from 40% renewables to 50% renewables. And in my honest opinion, I think that's more significant than 2050, 2060, 2070. Because the shorter term targets means they're going to do something right now. And in terms of, you know, what we're trying to achieve today, the decade of action, of accelerated action, this is way more significant than whether it's 50,